All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's just about 9 o'clock. We're expecting a few more people to join, but we do want to get started. So I'll start with some of the housekeeping things. My name is Helen Meyer. I'm the Development Director at Pine Tree Legal Assistance. And we are asking all of our participants to stay muted today and use the chat feature to introduce yourselves. We are really glad to have everyone here with us for this virtual event. We've done one of these before and it was really successful, so we're going to keep the series going with different topics. Today we are talking about public benefits, and particularly in the time of COVID-19. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone to stay muted and use the chat feature for questions. If you don't have, if you're participating by phone and you don't have access to the chat, please feel free to email your questions to Julia Dornbush at jdornbush@ptla.org. We'll also be recording the event and we'll be sharing a copy of the recording with the participants afterwards, and we'll post it on our Facebook page. So if you want to share it with someone, please feel free to share the link to the recording. And at the end of the conversation, we will be raffling off a bag of Coffee by Design coffee. You don't have to be present to win. I have the names of everyone who registered, so we'll do the raffle at the end, and I will follow up by email with everyone, with anyone who is our winner. So without further ado, I want to get us started. Our agenda for today includes two fabulous members of Pine Tree's team. First, the directing attorney of our Bangor office, Erica Veazey, will provide an overview of public benefits and why they're so important to the stability of our clients. And next, Kaylee Bonte, a staff attorney from our Lewiston office, will talk about how legal services can help clients navigate the complexities of the public benefit systems. Both Erica and Kaylee have some great client stories that they're going to share with you to talk about, to illustrate the impact that legal services has in these types of cases. We're going to try to answer questions as we go. So if you have questions, please enter them in the chat function and we'll look at them as we go, and we'll also save time for questions and answers at the end. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Erica. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks, Helen. As Helen said, my name's Erica Veazey. I work in the Bangor office of Pine Tree Legal Assistance. And I am going to tell you a little bit about some of the public benefits work we do, but I know that before we start that, we actually have some polls to quiz you a little bit about some of your knowledge about public benefits. But don't worry, if you don't know the answer or you get it wrong, you'll be able to stay in the Zoom. We won't kick you out. We won't judge you. But this is just to sort of get us talking a little bit about public benefits and Pine Tree and what they look like here in the state of Maine. So you can click your answers and submit them. The first question is, what % of working Maine families were living below 200% of the poverty line in 2019? And the second question is, what's the average amount of SNAP, which is another name for food stamps, benefits that is received per person per meal in our state? So you can submit your answers. And we'll see what the results are when we have a significant number of people responding. Oh, there's 3 and 4 is up here too. I'm sorry. I saw 1 and 2 and I thought that was it. We also have number 3, which is a true-false question. The COVID stimulus checks could disqualify someone from public benefits programs here in Maine. And then the fourth question is, how many cases related to public benefits have been handled by Pine Tree since March 15th, 2020? which is about when all of this stuff started to happen. So take your best guess, and we'll go over the answers, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about our public benefits practice here. Okay, so what percentage of working families in Maine were living below 200% of the federal poverty level? The correct answer is 28.5%. And so that is 1, 2, 3, 4, the third one down. That's a really high number, and we're going to talk in a minute about what the poverty percentages are. Number 2, the average amount of SNAP benefits per person per meal, $1.40. So a majority of you got that right. It's not very much. Number 3, true or false, the COVID stimulus checks could disqualify someone from public benefits program. The good news is this is false. So everything that we've learned since March tells us that there should not be a negative impact for people on public benefits programs as a result of receiving these stimulus checks. And then number 4, how many cases related to public benefits have been handled by Pine Trees since March 15th, 2020? And I probably need Nicole to help me with the right answer on this one because I can't quite remember which one it is.
244.
244. So that's a lot. Since March, that's only 3 months ago. So that's a large number of people called us with a issue related to public benefits. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So, all right. Well, thank you for participating in that. Let me just first talk with you about what the federal poverty levels are, because here at Pine Tree, we help people, generally speaking, families, individuals that are at or below 125% of the poverty level. And also, a lot of the programs that I'm going to talk to you about, these public benefits programs, also look at where people are as a percentage of the federal poverty level to determine their eligibility. And so you've probably heard the term federal poverty level before. It's actually a dollar figure that's published by the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. Each year it's updated, and it's based on household size. But if you've heard that term, you may not know what it actually, what those levels actually are. And so here's a chart that shows you. This is the 2020 federal poverty levels as set by the Department of Health and Human Services. And so what this means is if you're a household size of 1 and you are earning $1,063 per month, you're at 100% of the federal poverty level. In the household size of 2, it's 1,436. So I won't go through all of them, but this just gives you a sense of what we're talking about. It is not a huge amount of money. Living at 100% of the federal poverty level actually doesn't tell you a whole lot about your ability to afford basic necessities. And in fact, here's an interesting fact for you. If you received SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income, that's a Social Security benefit that's available to people who are disabled and unable to work, but don't have a significant work history. Those people receive $783 a month. So if you're a household of 1, Social Security, and you're disabled and you don't have a significant work history, you're going to get $783 a month. That's well below the 100% of the federal poverty level. So that gives you some sense of what this, what we're talking about when we talk about these percentages. And something else to think about, there is a HUD. HUD is the Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD sets fair market rents each year for every state and different areas of the state. And it tells you what their fair market rent is for a particular area. It doesn't mean in reality you're going to find an apartment to rent at that level, but they set these levels to say this is what the fair market rent could be. And so in Portland, for example, a fair market rent, the HUD 2020 HUD fair market rent for a 1-bedroom is $1,167. So if you're a household size of 1 living at 100% of the federal poverty level, you already can't even afford a 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, and you haven't even paid any other bills yet. And you might think that, well, maybe you're not going to live in Portland. Maybe you have to live somewhere else. So the Bangor 1-bedroom fair market rent right now is $743. And even if you go all the way up to Presque Isle, the HUD fair market rent for a 1-bedroom in Presque Isle right now is $602. So even if you lived in Presque Isle and you have this monthly income of $1,063, here you are spending more than 60% of your income just on rent alone before you pay for any of your utilities, your phone, your food, your healthcare, any of those things. So I think it's really important because this kind of illustrates how critical these public benefits can be for folks. If you're struggling to rent an apartment and you're bringing in $1,000 a month, then $200 in food stamps is a huge deal. And it's really important to you to be able to keep that money so that you can survive. And so that's why this is such a high priority area for Pine Tree, because we recognize that without some of these public benefits programs, people really do not have a chance to kind of meet basic necessities. So here's what some of the public benefits programs we deal with here at Pine Tree are. We work on SNAP, which is the newer name for the food stamps program. SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So we help people who are trying to qualify for benefits or have had a reduction in their benefits, maybe being told they were overpaid benefits, being told their benefits are being terminated. We help people with the TANF program. TANF stands for Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. It's a cash benefit program to families with minor children. We also help people with MaineCare. So that can be helping people apply, so eligibility issues, but also for people that are already on MaineCare who are having problems accessing a service. Maybe they're trying to get a particular, healthcare procedure covered or a particular medication, and MaineCare is telling them, no, you're not covered for that. And I'm sorry, I didn't explain this, but MaineCare is our Medicaid program here in Maine. So it's a health insurance program run by the state for low-income, disabled, elderly individuals and families. We also help people with Social Security benefits. I talked a little bit about SSI. There's also another kind of benefit called SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. That's for people that are now disabled but have a more significant work history. And then, of course, there's regular Social Security retirement benefits. And actually, I feel like I'm learning all the time, there's all sorts of other kinds of Social Security benefits. Unfortunately, we don't help people who are trying to apply for those benefits, just because there's just not enough of us to help with all those cases. But we do help people who are already receiving those benefits and are having some sort of an issue. Maybe they're losing the benefits or they've been told they've been overpaid, things like that. We also help people with the Low Income Heating and Energy Assistance Program. It's called LIHEAP for short. This is a program that helps people once per year with heating costs. That might be oil, could be help with an electric bill if they have electric heat. It could be help with wood, however it is that they heat their homes. We also help people with the General Assistance Program. This is sort of a program of last resort. It's designed to help people meet basic necessities. So things that are like rent, food, basic household supplies. It's a program that is run by every single town in the state of Maine. And it's essentially a voucher or cash sort of assistance program. That one's become really important during this time of COVID-19, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Another thing we do at Pine Tree is we do a little bit of work in veterans benefits, and we have a veterans unit. We have an attorney who works on a medical legal partnership with Togus, and he does some work in veterans benefits. And then also, we're just starting to get into the world of unemployment insurance. This is something that has always been an important benefit for people that have lost their jobs. It's a little bit of a new area for us, but again, really important in this time of COVID-19. So we're just starting to learn about that and figure out how it is that we're going to be able to help people having unemployment insurance problems. I'm sure you've heard plenty in the news about all the problems going on with unemployment right now. So those are the programs that we do most of our work in around public benefits here at Pine Tree. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the things that have changed in during this global pandemic. So the Department of Health and Human Services runs several of these programs: MaineCare, the Food Stamps or SNAP program, and TANF that we've talked about. And then general assistance is run by towns. The Social Security benefits are run by the Social Security Administration. So right now, if you're receiving MaineCare, or you know anyone who's receiving MaineCare, there's no terminations of MaineCare during this time of during the state of emergency, the governor's state of emergency. So nobody, in theory, nobody should be getting a letter saying you're losing your MaineCare. Everybody gets to keep their MaineCare while we've got this, this global health pandemic going on. And also there's no copays under MaineCare too. So if you have MaineCare and typically you might have a copay for a medication, right now you'd have no copay. With the SNAP or food stamps program, everybody who's on that program right now is getting the maximum benefit for their household size. And so the way that food stamps typically works is there's a maximum benefit based on how big the household is, but depending what your income is, that's reduced. And depending what your income is, it can be as low as $10 or $15 sometimes. But right now, during the state of emergency, everybody gets whatever their household size is, they get the maximum food stamps benefit, which is great. There's also some additional food stamps money that's available for families who have children who would normally get a subsidized school breakfast or lunch. So those families, because obviously there's no school going on right now, are getting some extra food stamps to help compensate for that. In terms of the TANF program, that cash benefit program for families, there is usually a 60-month time limit where people can't get this benefit for more than 5 years. That's waived right now. So even if a family had, let's say a few years ago, had gotten the benefit and reached their 60-month maximum, they could reapply and get that assistance right now. So that's an important one that not a lot of people know about. And then with the general assistance program, there's actually a governor's order that says that all applications that anyone makes to the general assistance program is treated as an emergency application. And essentially what that does is it allows the towns to relax some of the rules, give people more money than they might typically be able to solve an emergency, like I can't pay my rent, or we've run out of oil. And it also allows towns, instead of just having to give somebody assistance for a 30-day period before they reapply, it allows a town to give assistance for a 60-day period, so that somebody doesn't have to come back and fill out all the forms again and go through that twice in that 60-day period. Another thing that you saw in that poll that we just did is about the stimulus checks. Those are issued by the IRS, and when we first learned that everybody would be getting stimulus checks, we had to figure out how these were going to impact everyone's public benefits. So good news is that one by one, all of these programs came around, and we were able to learn that the stimulus check shouldn't affect anybody's eligibility for these programs. So typically you have income and asset limits on these programs, and if you exceed those, you're not eligible anymore. And so each of these programs, all the DHS programs and the general assistance program through the governor's order, the stimulus checks don't count as income, and if somebody saves it and holds on to it, it doesn't count as an asset against them. So that was great news. We were really happy to hear that, because otherwise, a $1,200 stimulus payment that was meant to really help people in an emergency could actually cause a lot of problems. So we were glad about that. I will say, one of the things we are concerned about at Pine Tree is, you saw we've had a number of cases since March on this issue, and actually it's an increase for us over the last year at the same time period for the cases of public benefits issues that we've had. But one of the concerns we've got is that people may not know about all of these different protections or added benefits that they can access during this time. And I'll give you an example. I talked to a gentleman last week who has a family, and he's got some income, and at one point in time, a couple of years ago, he'd been getting food stamps, but because his income had gone up a bit, the food stamps for his family had decreased down to about $15, $20 a month. And there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of sort of work that's involved in trying to get the food stamps benefits. So he just decided, you know what, this isn't worth the $15 that we're going to get a month. And so he'd taken his family off of the food stamps program. And when I talked to him a couple weeks ago, I had explained, look, if you were getting food stamps right now, you'd actually be getting the maximum benefit for your 3-person household. He hadn't realized that. And so, it had been months since he'd gotten any food stamps at all. And had he known that, he could have gotten back on the program or reapplied, and he would have gotten the max benefit. So it's one of the things we're worried about is that folks just don't know about some of these programs. We put information on our website, we publish it on our Facebook, but people don't know about the different programs that are available to them. And so we are worried that people aren't getting all the support that they might need. So that's sort of an overview of how COVID has impacted our public benefits work. We've definitely seen an increase in the number of cases and the number of calls that we're getting. And we're absolutely prioritizing that work because we know how important it is that people have access to these programs to help make ends meet. And I'm sure we'll continue to see that increase going forward as the crisis continues.
Thank you, Erica. We really appreciate that. It was wonderful. I know I learned a lot for sure. If people have questions, please feel free to go ahead and enter them in the chat. And in the meantime, I think we'll turn it over to Kaylee to talk a little bit more about when Pine Tree gets involved and what our advocacy can look like. Thank you, Kaylee.
Hi, everyone. As Helen stated earlier, my name's Kaylee. I am a staff attorney in Pine Tree's Lewiston office. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what Pine Tree does in these cases, how to get us involved, or when to call us or refer someone to us about a public benefits matter. So Pine Tree can get involved once a client contacts us through our intake hours over the phone right now, or if they're referred directly through another agency, such as a case management agency or Preble Street Veteran Services. And currently our offices are closed to the public for in-person intake. So you'll definitely want to call during our intake hours, which we've expanded during this time of COVID. And you should either call us yourself or refer someone to Pine Tree if you or your client or someone you know has received any type of denial or termination of any of those public benefits programs that Erica went over. If you're being charged with an overpayment or an intentional program violation for some of those different programs. And ultimately, if you're not sure if it's something that Pine Tree can help with, or if it's a public benefit that we help with, when in doubt, definitely call or make the referral, because these issues can be really complicated to decipher on your own. And so it's, it's great and really helpful usually to have Pine Tree just take a look at it. And even if it's something we don't do or we're not able to assist, it's possible we can make a referral to someone who can, or at least provide some basic advice. So a few specific examples of some public benefits cases that you would want to reach out, and I think Erica covered a few, but just as a reminder, if you receive a letter of termination of your main care benefits, that's a great reason to give Pine Tree a call, especially as Erica said. Right now, we know that those terminations should not be occurring during the governor's state of emergency. However, we have seen multiple cases where clients are still getting those letters from the department. If you or someone you know or a client of yours receives a notice from Social Security that they've overpaid you in benefits and now you owe them back for that overpayment, there can be a lot of different reasons, and the Social Security regulations are really lengthy and difficult to understand, and it's always worth having Pine Tree take a look at those issues. And another example would be if you receive a letter that you or someone you know receives a letter that you have intentionally violated the program rules of TANF. That's a great reason to reach out to Pine Tree. Recently, Pine Tree had a case where the department alleged that our client intentionally violated the program rules by not reporting a change in her household, but she had proof that she had actually reported that change. And so, you know, we were able to ensure that she was not charged with an intentional program violation, which is really detrimental because it'll result in losing your benefits for a specific period of time, depending on what number violation it could be for you. But ultimately, if you're not sure, when in doubt, you know, give us a call or refer someone, and we're always happy to take a look.
So we had a couple of questions coming through the chat before we get to case stories. So someone asked, what are the obligations of towns with general assistance? You mentioned that they can, but must they do anything extra?
That's a great question. Kaylee, do you want me to try to answer this one? I don't know how you want to do it. Okay, great. So general assistance is a program that each individual town runs. It's great because that means it's local. You can go to your local town office and apply, and you're not, you know, trying to get to a state agency office. The downside to that is towns vary in their size, their experience level with general assistance, and so you might have, for example, I'm in Bangor. Bangor has a general assistance program that actually has full-time staff working on it. They're very familiar with the program rules, and they've got a pretty good system for administering it. But you might have a very small town that doesn't get general assistance applications very often and isn't really well trained in how to process them or what the rules are and things like that. And so during this time, it's been really important for us to hear from people when they've been having an issue with general assistance, because sometimes what it boils down to is a town not necessarily understanding what they can do or what they're obligated to do. So I think the question here was whether the town's obligated to do something extra. So that 60-day time period I talked about where the town can extend the eligibility period for 60 days, that's an optional. The town doesn't have to. There can be some real benefits to the town for doing that, because they can help stabilize somebody in a bit longer term basis, and they don't have to process multiple applications from the same person or coordinate getting documents and things like that. But some towns may decide they don't want to do that for various reasons. There are some things that aren't optional though. Under the governor's order, every application for general assistance is treated as an emergency application. That's not optional. A town can't say, we've decided in this case we won't treat it as an emergency. They have to treat it as an emergency. And what that means is that somebody can ask for potentially more money than what the limits might typically be if they need that because they can't pay their rent or they can't fill their oil tank or something like that. So there are some things that really aren't optional under the governor's order. And we hope that if people are encountering problems with general assistance, that they call us so that we can try to help them sort out, is there something that the town might be doing that violates the governor's order, or are they making an incorrect decision? And is there some way we can try to help them resolve that?
Thanks, Erica. We have one more question come in, which is how long are the max SNAP benefits available?
Sorry, I was muted. Kaylee, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kaylee and I actually worked on this because we've been working on some of the materials we're publishing on our website. So my understanding is that the maximum food stamps benefits are extending for the months that the governor's state of emergency is ongoing. So that was June 11th, it was set to expire. I think it's been extended to July. So everybody in June should have gotten the maximum for their household size. And I think that will happen again in July because the state of emergency will still be going on.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So those are all the questions for now. So if people have other questions, you can put them in the chat and we can answer them after we hear some case stories.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a story. This isn't a case that happened during the COVID-19, so it's not in the last 3 months, but I do think it's a great story that really illustrates how difficult it can be for somebody to resolve a public benefits problem on their own without assistance. So a few years ago, I had a client who came in during one of our walk-in hours, and he had with him a letter he'd gotten from the Department of Health and Human Services about his food stamps. And the letter said that he was being charged with an intentional program violation. And you might have heard Kaylee mention that before. What that is when the department thinks that someone has violated one of the program rules on purpose, intentionally, there's a more severe punishment than if you just, oops, I didn't realize I was supposed to report this or something went wrong, you know? So the Department of Health and Human Services, if you're charged with an intentional program violation, the first time that happens, you can be kicked off the food stamps program for a year. 1 year is like a really long time not to get benefits. If you get a second intentional program violation, you're kicked off for 2 years. And if you get a third, you are kicked off for the rest of your lifetime. So it's really important when this happens that we figure out, and a client comes in with this, if there really was an intentional program violation or not, because not only is the punishment severe, but it's sort of this cumulative thing. If it happens in the future, you could get kicked off for the rest of your life. And so this client was charged with an intentional program violation. And a little bit of background on this client, he had a couple of challenges that made it a little bit even more, difficult for him. First of all, English was not his first language. Spanish was his first language. So he had a language barrier going into this. And second was, he actually had a really serious head injury. He'd had a gunshot wound to his head, and he had some neurological, consequences for that. And so he was not only English was his second language, but also he had some disabilities that made it even harder for him to try to sort out what was going on and what to do. So the food stamps program had charged him with this intentional program violation. They accused him of getting food stamps in 2 different states. And the client had lived in New Mexico a few years, 3 years before he came into our office. And he'd moved to Maine. When he moved to Maine, he was getting food stamps in New Mexico. He reported to the food stamps program in New Mexico, I'm moving, I don't need benefits here anymore. He moved to Maine, and then he reapplied when he got to Maine because he was a Maine resident. And so what happened is it turned out that his food stamps had never been shut off in New Mexico. And so the food stamps in Maine, it took them several years, but they eventually found out he'd been getting benefits issued in his name in New Mexico for a couple of years. So there was an overlap, there was a time period where he'd been getting benefits in different states. Now, he was only using his food stamps benefits here in Maine. He didn't live in New Mexico. He didn't know what had happened to the card. He'd gotten rid of it. He thought he'd thrown it out. So he certainly didn't know he was getting any benefits in New Mexico. But DHS said that was an intentional program violation. He'd intentionally gotten benefits in 2 different states. So the first thing I did, besides requesting a hearing with the department so we could, we could contest this IPV, intentional program violation, is I called up DHS in New Mexico, and I sort of worked my way up the chain, and I eventually got somebody who was willing to pull some records for me. And then it took this strange twist, because it turned out that in New Mexico, they didn't have a fully electronic system. So they had all of these paper records that were stored in this warehouse. So I ended up having to convince somebody in New Mexico to go into this warehouse and pull out his old file and get it all and scan it all to me and give it to me. And once I got that paper file and I looked at when the benefits were being used in New Mexico, and I compared it to when the benefits were being used here in Maine, it was very clear. There were some days where the food stamps cards were being used, on the same day, hours apart. So obviously it wasn't my client who was using the benefits in New Mexico. And he didn't know what had happened with the card, and he didn't know who had it or if somebody pulled it out of the trash or what had happened. But clearly it wasn't him doing that, and it certainly wasn't him doing that on purpose. So once we had all that information, getting ready for the hearing, I submitted it all to DHS. And actually the day before the hearing, they called and they said, okay, we agree he didn't commit an intentional program violation. And so they withdrew that, and he got to keep his benefits, which was great. But I think what it sort of illustrates is that for somebody who has, it would be hard for anybody to figure out what the program rules are, what evidence do I need, how do I go about getting it? But it's even more challenging for somebody that's got, English as their second language, and they've got some disabilities that make it harder. There was just, as a practical matter, no way he would ever have been able to effectively fight that on his own without having an advocate of some kind. So I think it just sort of illustrates, it wasn't brilliant legal work. It wasn't some novel legal argument that I made in front of our highest court. It was just advocacy, knowing the program rules, and being available to him to access that made the difference for him.
Great. Thank you, Erica. That was a wonderful story. Kaylee, I think we'll have you share your story. I know we're going a little bit over, so hopefully folks can stick on. So we'll listen to Kaylee's story, and then we've got a few more questions we'll answer, and then we'll wrap up. So thanks, Kaylee.
So I had a client who came to Pine Tree because he received a notice from the department related to his main care that they were denying a medical procedure. His provider had submitted tons of documentation about, and the doctor said was medically necessary to treat my client's very severe sleep apnea. The client had tried a number of treatments over the years, and this procedure was kind of the last possible option. And the sleep apnea was so severe that it really affected many aspects of his daily life. And so I requested to have a hearing on the denial of the procedure on behalf of the client. And someone from the department reached out about the hearing and essentially told me a different way that I could go about having this procedure approved instead of having a hearing. However, I insisted on maintaining our hearing request. And then within 2 weeks, they reconsidered their decision and added the medical procedure to the list of covered procedures for individuals on main care. And so I think that just kind of shows that sometimes, just our presence or insistence on having a hearing can bring favorable outcomes for our clients, especially in a situation like this where it's, a really medically necessary procedure to help someone be able to just function from day to day.
Great. Thank you, Kaylee. All right, so we have a few questions in the chat. One is, how long are the extra and expanded unemployment benefits lasting?
I don't know if you want me to take this one or you want to take it. Okay, well, I think you're probably talking about is the pandemic unemployment assistance. So again, this is a bit of a new area for us, but what I understand is that those extra $600 weekly benefits would be continuing till the end of July, unless something gets expanded under the CARES Act. One of the things we've learned in this that has been really interesting is that if you are receiving even $1 in unemployment insurance, you're entitled to that $600 in pandemic unemployment assistance. So somebody, it makes it worthwhile filing a claim for all of the difficulty and hassle that can be, because under normal circumstances, maybe someone would get such a small amount, it might not be worth it. But here you're getting $1 of unemployment insurance in Maine, you're going to get that $600 a week in pandemic as well.
Thank you, Erica. And another question also about unemployment. This is, you mentioned you will be helping with unemployment. In what way? Will you be working on denied claims or more proactive and help people file?
Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that we will be focusing more on denials of unemployment assistance.
That's right. And so, what we're expecting at some point after, now that the Department of Labor is sort of working through this backlog of cases, is that some people may start to get denials, or they might be getting a denial if there's a returning to work situation and they have a reason that they can't return to work, maybe a COVID-19 related reason, that there might be some denials or terminations based on that. So those kinds of things we'd be looking at. And also helping people prepare for the fact finding, which is another sort of step in the process. I think it would be great to be able to help people with the applications as well, because that if something goes wrong there, what we've learned is it can be weeks before that gets sorted out. But right now we don't have the capacity to do that. And the other thing we're sort of lacking is the program expertise. So I'm hoping that as we learn more and all of us start doing these, we'll start to learn these as well as we know things like food stamps and the TANF program. And maybe at that point we'll have a way to be more effective in helping people from the initial stages. So you'll have to bear with us as we learn it too.
Great. Thank you, Erica. Thank you all for those great questions. I know we're running over, so as a thank you to everyone for participating today, we have a little raffle. We're going to be having a pound of coffee from Coffee by Design delivered to our winner, or if you prefer tea or hot chocolate. So I've got everybody who registered in here in our jar, so we'll just pick a raffle winner. And the winner is Donald Lowry. So Don, I will follow up with you by email to arrange for the coffee. And thank you all for joining us. If you are interested in getting involved with Pine Tree Legal Assistance, we can always use your help. There are a few things that we could specifically use your help for, so please go onto our website and our social media accounts and share our resources. As Erica and Kaylee mentioned, one of our greatest concerns is that people just don't know what protections and benefits are out there, and we really want to spread the word. So please go on and share those resources in your communities. For lawyers in the state, we have plenty of volunteer opportunities. We are expecting sort of an avalanche of need coming up when the courts reopen in August, and we could use all the help we could get. So please reach out to our pro bono team if you're able. And then of course, financial contributions are always welcome and always needed. So people can make a donation straight from our website, or if you're an attorney, we would prefer if you donate through the Campaign for Justice, which is a shared campaign. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.